So I'm going to try and talk about, in a way, work with meaning, or work that doesn't have meaning, going through, starting off roughly where Elena started, in fact. So in the 1950s, there were predictions of lives of plenty and leisure for all through wonderful technological advance. And the technology duly arrived, but the lives of plenty and leisure for all didn't. And the question is, why not? And I'll answer that with another question, which is, what is the most dangerous word in this sentence? Robots are going to take all of our jobs.
Jobs?
The most dangerous, well, it's not robot. It could be jobs, but I think it's our. So your washing machine is a robot. It's taken your job. Now, are you deeply concerned? Do you want the job back? So when you own the robot, it saves you work. If your employer owns the robot, it saves them money by putting you out of work. And so the 1950s dream became a nightmare because we didn't understand ownership. And the problem with robots and jobs isn't really about technology, it's about ownership. It's about who owns the technology. But the problem with ownership goes deeper than that. It goes down to who owns the jobs. So when someone owns your job, essentially they own how you make a living. And they own your means of survival. And that's why the most dangerous word is our, because they're not our jobs. And that's where all the rest of the problems come from. And so the next thing I want to talk about, I've called this section, when we've done enough, we stop. So when you do something that needs doing, when you've done it, typically you would stop. It would be madness to continue after you've actually done what needed doing. But if you arrange your society so that people make a living only by making or doing things to sell, then just to survive, we have to make sure that we never stop making or doing those things. And we have to make sure that people never stop buying them, even if there's no need for them. So as a personal example, as well as an electronics and software engineer, I'm a gardener. And a year or two ago, I made a special cold frame that keeps my seedlings warm at night using the heat stored in water. And it took me a day or so to make, and it will last for 20 years. It just carries on doing its job. I don't have to do anything. In my paid, so as soon as I finished it, I stopped. In my paid work, I design and produce little control computers. In order to carry on having a living, I have to sell, several thousands of those a year. I have to keep selling them, whether or not the world needs more little control computers. And it gets worse if you make a living by employing other people to make things, to sell at a profit. And that's because, first of all, you don't actually have to do the work, all this extra work that you're making happen. By not paying your employees the full value of what they've produced, you make a profit. Your profits can fund advertising to create cravings for things that people don't need. And if you become very rich, you can essentially buy the government and then create laws which cement your economic position in place. The whole idea of owning things that big. So, and also, though I think that the basic principle of trade unions is a good one, when unions fight for jobs without challenging the overall economic system, they too get caught up in ensuring that we never stop producing and consuming. So, and when our economic system is based on having to sell stuff that people don't need, it leads to, first of all, loads of work being done that doesn't need doing, and secondly, loads of work that needs doing isn't done. And so, when you have a lot of work being done that doesn't need doing, it makes work meaningless. It's not human anymore. So what I'd like to do, what I'd like us all to do really, is imagine that we get a chance to start over, start again from the beginning. What might work be like in a human-centered or what I'd call a non-exploitative society? So this is the way I imagine a group of people, if they got stranded on a desert island, this is how we'd behave. We'd thoughtfully consider the work that actually needs doing to sustain everyone. We'd divide that work up fairly amongst everyone and organise ourselves to do it, mostly in teams. The teams would elect leaders, but the leaders aren't more important than the team. They do the same work, they just have an additional role. And from my experience, living in an intentional community and working in a worker-owned business, there's immense satisfaction in being part of teams like this. And part of my experience suggests to me that even difficult or boring or dangerous or dirty work can be satisfying if it meets these kinds of conditions. If it needs doing, if its true worth is recognised. So if the people, if cleaning sewers is recognised, given the kind of worth that it actually has, if you imagine sewers backing up, you can imagine how important it is to clean sewers. If the true worth of that work was recognised, then you'd recognise the people doing it. If the work is done as part of a team, so you're doing it with other people, and if everyone does their share, then I think even difficult, boring, dirty or dangerous work becomes satisfying. But of course, when we own the jobs ourselves, we also naturally ask, how can we do this better? How can we make this not difficult, boring, dangerous or dirty? Without just passing the buck on to someone else. Then after we figured out what needs doing, we look at what we want to do. All the extra time we can spend doing what we really love doing. And we can organise to do that as individuals, as teams, however we want to. And so I also thought that I was wondering about what would meaningful work be in the situation we're living in right now. And so one of the ways I would characterise the situation we're in right now is, we're living in interesting times. We have the breakdown of the dominant economic system and the social and political systems that held it in place. And along with it, the breakdown of the ecological underpinning of human civilization. And as I see it, there is nothing more meaningful than doing what's necessary to set this right. The interesting thing is we're not doing it. If you were in a house with a bunch of other people and the house caught fire, you can imagine that people would immediately set to doing what needed doing. The way I've enumerated it here is we would accurately evaluate the nature of the problem. We would alert everyone to the nature of the problem, and then we would organise everyone by combining each person's unique capabilities to the maximum effect to solve the problem. So some people would figure out who's in each room, other people would investigate the best fire escapes, and other people would communicate to all the people they found exactly the way to get out. It would just be instant organisation doing the right thing. So I think that possibly the most interesting question in the world right now is, why are we not doing this? So that's my talk.